Okay. Thank you everyone for sticking with it and being here for our panel today. We are really excited to be talking about solar. And so I'm Elizabeth Thilmany. I'm a proud member of the ALEI working group. I am based out of College Park. Today we're going to be talking, on the vague title of Solar Development in Maryland, but we're going to really be digging in, starting with the director of the Power Plant Assessment Division within Maryland's Department of Natural Resources, Bob Sadzinski. He's going to start talking about the regulatory landscape, things like the CPCN process. I'll let him, spell that out for you guys. Then I'll touch on our research and educational outreach needs that we found from focus groups, land use impacts and analysis. And then Dr. Drew Schiavone will close out. He's our extension specialist in energy conservation and technology to share additional energy resources and our budding research work in agrivoltaics that UME is embarking on. So without further ado, Bob Sadzinski.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Again, I'm the director of the Power Plant Research Program here in the Maryland DNR. And I'm going to talk about, I live in a world of acronyms, so I was really happy this morning when you all were living in that world of acronyms. I had no clue what you were talking about. So hopefully I'm going to try and explain mine a little bit. But the CPCN is Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, and that is what we're going to be talking about first. But just a little trivia. So how much energy does Maryland use? We use a lot. So about 60 million megawatt hours, and you think, wow, that's more electricity than we produce. We import about 40% of the energy, but out of that, what do we do in state? So most of our electricity comes from not solar. No, it certainly comes from nuclear and gas. Currently, that's what we produce in state right now, and you can see the others listed in there also. You'll see solar is 2.7%. So you'll see in a little bit, we have a renewable portfolio standard that basically says what we should be producing, but we're only at 2.7, but I'll cover that in a little bit. So PJM is the RTO, is the regional, see I'm doing acronyms, regional transmission organization. They control the flow of electricity through the states, including all of Maryland and the states all around us. And I always like to say that there's 80,000 generation plants in Maryland. You go, we have 80,000 plants, generation plants? Most of those are rooftop solar. So many of those, I like to say like 79,000 are probably rooftops. And that's what we said, about 105 of those are actually what comes through my office. I'll go through that in a minute. But what the types of solar in Maryland, generally you see these. You see the rooftops. That's the one we just talked about. Those are the residential ones, the small ones. They're generally hooked to the grid. A lot of that electricity goes back onto the grid when not in use. But a majority of that is used in household, and they use the grid basically as a big battery. The other is community solar. Those are those medium-sized ones. They could be on a large rooftop or sometimes a pretty large solar facility site, ground-mounted. There's also commercial, which is kind of like that, less than 2 megawatts, and I'll go over what a megawatt is here in a little bit. And last is what comes through my office, that utility scale. Those are larger ones that got usually greater than 2 megawatts. And the rule is how much solar is on 2 megawatts? Usually 1 megawatt takes 5 acres of land. So for 2 megawatt, we see at least 10 acres of land covered in solar panels. So here's the graph that I stole from one of the work groups I was on from MEA. Thank you very much. But just kind of gives you kind of who needs to be approved in the approval process. But you'll see what comes through my office is the last column there. And really, we do the environmental and socioeconomic impact analysis for the Public Service Commission. So the Public Service Commission has the authority then to regulate those really large power plants, and I'll go in a second what those are. But usually for solar, that's anything 2 megawatts or more is required to have a certificate of public convenience and necessity. So, and that's what we call the CPCN. So typically we have how many facilities? We have 22 currently in review CPCN cases, all solar, and we have 2 transmission cases. our plate is extremely full. Our average is about 5 or 6 projects per year. So I feel bad for my staff. There was one still here. They're pretty overwhelmed, so if you're a developer, please just hold off a little bit. But we've heard that there's at least 60 plus more coming our way. So there's a ton of community solar coming our way. These big utility scale solar, out of the 22 we have right now, only 2 of those are greater than 5 megawatts. So then only 2 of those are greater than 25 acres of solar panels. But generally, like I said, 1 megawatt is 5 acres. So this facility here would cover approximately 250 acres on solar panels. But again, as far as megawatt hours, it produces over 122,000 megawatt hours, and that's used to power over 11,000 homes. What is the CPCN? Again, that's their Certificate of Convenience and Necessity. That's basically the state permit issued by the Public Service Commission that gives them permission to build that. And that's when that dirty word preemption comes in. That is not me, okay? I don't do preemption. That is the Public Service Commission. They have the authority, and you'll know for you lawyers, that's through the perennial case. They were basically, that authority was granted, or reaffirmed then, shall we say. So we do the environmental impact and socioeconomic impact analysis. We have 6 months by statute to get that completed. So again, what do you need to do a solar facility? These large CPCN cases, one of the first things you do is this PJM connection, which is, hopefully PJM is not here. It's a train wreck right now, okay? Some of those projects have been sitting in the queue, and what that means is they have to go to PJM and ask permission and get the authority to connect to the grid. And you think, and that's why we see so many little ones right now, because those little ones, less than 5 megawatts, can go directly onto distribution lines. So out of the 22 projects, that's why we see 20 small community solar projects now between that 2 and 5 megawatts, and we only have 2 that made it through the PJM queue years and years ago. I did talk to PJM, and I know there's 6 supposed to be coming our way. So that would be probably anywhere, those 100 megawatt projects. We do know we have a 300 megawatt project coming to Allegheny County on a closed coal mine site. But again, here's the Public Service Commission does the authority. They also require county permits, but I'll go into that details, and also some state permits. So the CPCN, again, what we do is we conduct an independent, comprehensive, objective, you can call it which one, assessment. So we have a great crew of people. We have consultants that work for us. We have 6 months to complete our assessment. We take a deep dive into all kinds of stuff. And what we look at, and we also coordinate with the other state agencies, whether it's Department of Planning, Commerce, MDE, acronyms, Maryland Department of Environment, and also the Maryland Energy Administration. You see the list there. But only 2 have to sign off on it now, which is no big deal to you. That's a big deal to us. We had to, in the old days, we had to drive around to get wet signatures on these things, and that was a pain. Now we do everything electronic. They finally stepped into the 21st century, if I can blame them again. So the pre-application process. Luckily, PSC did a rulemaking several years ago, and now it's required. They must go to the county first. So 90 days before they file an application with the Public Service Commission, they have to go before the county, and actually, it's a little vague what they have to do, but it says meet or give them application. It's a little vague. Our attorneys are still like, yeah, that counts, checks the box. But they meet with the county. They also have to meet with us 45 days before they submit an application. And this is the pre-app. This is the time that we sit down and say, okay, they show us the project. You'll see a few pictures here in a minute and go, what's the matter with this project? And we're pretty nitpicky. So we're about the 70 different factors we look at. We'll say, look, you need to focus here. Maryland Historical Trust, have you talked to them? Have you talked to MDE? What about the wetland impacts? We just had a project last week that was a ditch in the middle of a field. We said, well, how are they crossing that ditch now? How are you going to cross that ditch? They're like, oh, I don't know. We haven't thought about it. I'm like, really? You haven't thought about it? So, but anyway, and also there's many other issues. So what we do, again, we also do a bunch of other things. We write what I call the cumulative environmental impact report. If you want to know anything about energy in the state, this is a 300-page report that has everything energy and the history of energy in the state. This is, I call it the Bible of energy in Maryland. It really is a really comprehensive report, and I kind of make all my new people kind of read this, and so just for torture, really. So Again, so again, we also do a lot of special studies. We just did a pretty extensive look at the renewable portfolio standard and the requirements to meet that. So we also look at the PJMQ, how many projects in the PJMQ, how quickly they're moving through, et cetera, et cetera. So what we do, so again, we get the application from the applicant for these pretty large solar projects. We take a deep dive into it, and the first thing we do is say it's complete or not complete. So again, we look at all the factors. We have a nice thorough checklist on our website. They have the checklist and they go, okay, we've done this, done that, done this. And then they come to us. We call it a reality check. So it's like, yeah, you kind of missed this. And so again, we will make a recommendation. The Public Service Commission is a judicial process, which I'm sure some of you attorneys, so this is a fully judicial process they have to go through. A judge oversees the case. So in order to intervene, you need to have an attorney to intervene in the process. And again, it's a 6 months process that we have. Generally, the whole case will take about 8 months to get through the whole judicial process. So what we look at, so there's lots of things. Most of the projects that we deal with are on ag. Okay, so it's pretty consistent what we look at. We do have that brownfield study, brownfield site out there in Allegheny County, closed mine. And it's, that's a really large 300 megawatts. So if you do the math quick, it's over 1,500 acres of a brownfield site being utilized for solar. So again, we look at all these factors. These are just some of the biggies. You hear decommissioning, you hear glare analysis, visual impacts. That's all the stuff we do in-house. Luckily, we have some really great consultants who work for us and do a lot of the heavy lifting. So, but number of cases. So where do we see most of the cases? In the old days, we saw most of the cases on the Eastern Shore. These are the really large utility scale solar running from 50 to 150 megawatts. They were 55% were roughly on the Eastern Shore. Now we're seeing that switch. With community solar, we're seeing more projects. This is not based on size, it's based on number. So we're seeing many more projects right here. In Allegheny, I'm sorry, not Allegheny. It would be Anne Arundel, PG County, we're seeing a few projects coming up through Howard, Carroll, kind of the middle of the state right now. Number of projects. So I mentioned this already. I project we're going to have 24. I'm off by a few projects. We've been told we're going to get one per week coming into us. So we're probably estimating about 28 to 30 projects by the end of the year. Just don't tell my staff who's sitting over here. So it's a pretty heavy lift that we do. I mean, it takes 6 months for a case. Each of the folks have 5 cases. So the most I ever had was 4, and I got it all confused. So I feel bad for them. Don't tell them that I used to mess up, which was 4. But what we project is a lot more. We even think that battery energy storage, which we're not going to discuss much, will also come before. There's legislation submitted that will probably be approved and passed, allowing battery energy storage to come into the CPCN process. That's kind of in the works right now. They drafted some of the language that's already come through review with us. We've already commented. So we've been told pretty much that's coming our way. That's why you'll see the jump next year with 35, and the year after that at 40. Then the PJMQ will loosen up a little bit. So we assume we're going to get more of those larger projects. SEIA, looking at the Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA, they project the same thing. So it's the trend that we see throughout the whole U.S., that solar is increasing and increasing at a rate, a significant rate. So the Maryland Renewable Portfolio Standards. So this is the RPS. So you hear the RPS. This is the legislators actually, and I'll get into a second here, what they deem what each one should be. So we have hydro, and I like the solar project. This picture is from 1954. So solar's been around a few years. So the geothermal, which is just, there's a bill that instituted last year, and there's different types of biomass that also fall on RPS, and of course onshore and offshore wind. So what it does, what are the benefits of an RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard? Greenhouse gas emission reductions, I won't go into the details. Also, alternate revenue for farmers. I mean, it does provide an alternate revenue for them, pretty significant if you talk to some of them. Brownfield, I talked about the brownfield redevelopment. I mean, this is a great site with solar on one of the closed mines. The soil is really bad, it's really rocky. I mean, there's some junk out there that grows, but it's a really good site. We're also looking at some landfill sites that are proposing solar. Some more benefits, energy independence. Right now, we import about 60% of our energy. So become more energy independent. But again, one of my consultants already said, that's not a big deal. So, but we always think be independent. We want to be independent as Maryland. So if we import 60%, there's a lot more energy that needs to be produced between offshore wind, onshore wind, and renewables. It also should lower the cost of renewable energy to consumers, reduces water usage. I mean, between gas and coal, they consume a significant amount of water because they take that energy, convert it to steam. That steam is superheated, it goes through turbines, et cetera, et cetera. So, also right now we're talking to commerce and planning. There's significant movement to develop these businesses, whether it's decommissioning. So we have a lot of solar panels we know in the future will be decommissioned. There's businesses coming for that. There's also businesses to make solar panels that are coming to Maryland. And of course, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions. How does it work? So basically an RPS says that a utility must get a percentage of the electricity based on legislation from renewable energy. And there's a chart I'll show you in a minute that can bore you to death. Thank you. So, but there's so little renewable energy produced in the state as far as solar, and I don't want to go into the SREC thing, though there's solar renewable energy credits, that now they can purchase what's called ACPs, alternative compliance payments, and that, so if there's not enough solar being produced, they still have to purchase these ACPs. And so that amounts to tens of millions of dollars, because remember, we're only producing 2.7% of the solar, when our goal, I think, is 7.5% right now. So that difference then is purchased through ACPs. And remember, solar RECs right now run between $40 and $60 each, and ACPs are running about $40 each. So if you know you need 60 million megawatt hours, for every 1 megawatt hour, that's 1 SREC. So if we're short that percentage, that's millions and millions of dollars. So here's the chart right here, and 6.5% is where we should be. We'll be at 7% in 2025. Again, we're at 2.7%, so we're far short of that. We do know that there's more being out there. There's almost 800 megawatts of solar fully approved that's just waiting to be developed. And that's my presentation next week if you all want to come to that. So, RPS, this is just another way of looking at RPS. So eventually the goal is 52.5% by 2030. What we need, so this is dated. So right now it's roughly, if you take the solar and you do the math, and I won't bore you with some of the details, but we need approximately 20,000 acres. So that's you'll see the acres of land per 5 megawatts. Things have changed, so this weighs rooftop being 80% or 60%. There's a whole bunch of math in here. So, but we know we need about 20 to 30,000 acres on ag land of solar being developed to reach the current projected RPS just for solar. So making sure you're not glazing over with that. I know it's a lot. So to conclude, so annually, I didn't talk about PJM. So PJM protects, for years, the load, which is how much energy we need in the state. They said it's going to be flat. But now with the dirty word data centers and with electrification, I mean, they're switching us to basically now PJM has said, oh, now we're going to see a 2.1% increase. When you're thinking about zero for almost 10 years, and now for the next, all the way to 2035, I believe, they're doing 2.1% increase. So in other words, we'll fall farther behind unless the renewable energy can really pick up. So again, 1,800 megawatt hours for every 1 megawatt of solar. Again, we're seeing technology efficiency with solar panels. I was talking to somebody, when you get solar on your house, make sure you get the most efficient panels. They'll try and sell you the ones that are 14% efficient. Oh, this one's 16% efficient. They make them now that are 27% efficient. So just tell them talk to me. Tell them call Bob. So, and also, like I said, we're about 600 megawatts short of operational solar. So we need 600 megawatts. But again, there's about 800 megawatts currently that are fully permitted and ready to go. And I think that is my last slide. Okay. And this is me, so, and I always like to offer, if you're confused by the CPCN process, I always say, give me a call. I'll be over here for a little bit, so feel free to call me. I can talk you through a Google Meets and walk you through the process. It is a bit overwhelming. I've been doing it for 12 or 14 years, so I'm old and grumpy, so I'm getting good at it. So, okay, thank you.
Awesome, and yes, Bob is super nice and likes to talk about the CPCN process. Seems like it. So thank you for that overview and getting us, situated and squared away on the CPCN process. What do landowners need? What does the rural community need in terms of resources, information, outreach materials? So we conducted focus groups thanks to this grant from NIFA. We have partners at Cornell and at Oklahoma State University. So we did focus groups mostly in New York and Maryland. We saw this growth in the development of rural lands into large-scale renewables. We saw that there could be economic opportunities. There's complex market dynamics for farmers, landowners, and rural communities. And then also just this general need for stakeholder-driven, research-based, unbiased information and training on solar energy leases and other parts of large-scale renewables. And so, again, these are what led us to decide to do a focus group with our partners at Cornell and Oklahoma State University. We did 2 sets of focus groups. We did focus groups with attorneys and we did focus groups with landowners. And again, a lot of our efforts came from New York and Maryland. Oklahoma State, talked to Paul more about why the focus groups just didn't take off there. I think wind has been the primary thing going on in Oklahoma. But we recruited attorneys through a lot of different avenues. And so you can see that we have representation from multiple states and jurisdictions. A lot from New York. We accounted for people who had licenses in multiple states. And then you can also see by the years as an attorney, we had more experienced attorneys, those who had been in the profession for a long time, as participants in our focus group. So we did these on Zoom. We used Zoom's transcription services. We started conducting these in 2021 and continued into 2022. If you guys remember this moment of COVID where this attorney couldn't figure out how to turn off the cat filter, it did feel like that at times because we were doing this on Zoom, but it was nice to have the transcription services so that we could have the best analysis of the focus groups. And then Paul had this great idea, I think he got it from someone else, an extension of doing Qualtrics to get their sign off and their, that they were willing to participate and we were going to use this data, things like that. And again, we then scrubbed that of any identifying information so that we could interpret the results. So here are some of our findings, insights on clientele that attorneys provided us. So I say that 5 attorneys across 2 focus groups, so basically this conversation kind of kept coming up, was that many of the landowners, as we suspected, are current or previous farmers, producers. Also, they confirmed another suspicion we had that a lot of landowners were not seeking legal counsel prior to getting into some of these large-scale renewable lease agreements. There were mentions of some of those landowners who were more proactive, but they were definitely in the minority. Other things that we found was that there was some speculation that attorneys had on why maybe landowners weren't seeking legal counsel, this fear of losing out, FOMO, as my generation sometimes says, of not getting the best deal. Like the developer would just move on to the next landowner, and they felt that time pressure. Also, that if a lot of the clients that ended up coming to attorneys were really coming more last minute. Maybe they had already signed some options agreement or another thing, and so a lot of times the attorneys had it was harder than if the landowners had shown up at the start. So what they started, as we were parsing through these transcripts, advice that we got, other insights that attorneys could provide us that we could start providing in educational materials and whatnot, was that the landowner should see these as offers that can be negotiated. So not just taking the first offer that was given to them or presented to them. They should actually, maybe if they can, talk to others, really think about it, and then negotiate. Another thing is that the landowner should pay attention to the details, understand the language. Again, this is a lot easier done than if you actually have an attorney on your side or on your team or an accountant or other people on your team to negotiate and look into these contracts. And then also just the importance of having competent legal counsel, hopefully an office that has already dealt with renewable energy development or something, and not that you're not their first case into that. Part of what makes this difficult in doing research and also having landowners figure out and what's best for them and what others are doing is that non-disclosure agreements are very common, and so that can make understanding what's in these a little more difficult. And then Maryland actually protects the land in a way through the CPCN process decommissioning, that it's required for CPCN approval to have a decommissioning bond put in place by the solar developer. Other states don't have those kinds of protections, and so especially a lot of the New York and Pennsylvania attorneys kept bringing up the importance of having in the contract or in the leasing agreement restoration bonds or indemnification clauses. So that's another thing to keep in mind that Maryland does that not all states do. And then we have our landowner focus groups that we're starting to look through. So some quotes, and as we keep digging into the transcript data, I really like this one from a landowner that was like, we're gonna make laws, things are gonna happen. You can put your voice out there, you can vote, you can do your part, but if you're not voicing your opinion, you're not making yourself heard, then they're just gonna continue on without that input. So definitely remembering that you have a voice. The CPCN process also has a public comment hearing, at least 2. A lot of them are on Zoom, so they're easier to participate in. You don't have to always be there in person. Also, that there's just lack of information out there. They don't have a frame of reference of what's a good deal, what's going on with large-scale development. It's moving really fast. And so these were definitely drivers into the next piece of research I'm going to talk a bit about. Oh, also, we were starting to able to get ranges of rental rates, estimates. From what we've heard, and again, we did these in like 2021 and 2022. These are on the lower end. A lot of these were coming out of New York, but really $1,000 per acre per year is kind of the minimum we're seeing for solar rental rates. So that's something to keep in mind. This is not like a survey. This is not exhaustive. This is just ranges that were provided in these conversations. So takeaways, we had some insights on what was needed for solar development outreach and curriculum. There was definitely a lack of impartial information, this need to have discussions and figure out some things that we can share, and really trying to ground our research and outreach in stakeholder perspectives and needs. So this leads me into this next research question that I took on. So I also, my background is in economics, but also I got a master's in GIS. So I like maps, I like making maps, I like data. So thanks to Northeast for helping me get this going. What type of land is being developed into large ground-mounted solar installations in Maryland? Really figuring out what's going on and keeping track of these solar installations. There's a need for it. Also, Maryland has great public information data, so through the CPCN process, I could actually start looking at the tax parcels that could be implicated in utility-scale solar development, and then also the land being built into the panels after approval. So, CPCN process again, this is what it looks like, hundreds of pages of PDFs, and then having poor undergraduate students in their summers code stuff from these documents so that we could start to analyze what's going on across different counties, different sizes of projects, things like that. And then this is an example of once we actually could see where a project was going, we used satellite imagery, and then you could actually start tracing the panels. I think this is the same project that you had on one of your slides, ironically. There's not a lot of irrigated land going into utility scale solar, so it kind of stands out. I have two data sets that I created from this, the tax parcels that are implicated in CPCN projects, and then I have the actual panels that are traced from the project. So even if a project hasn't been passed or it hasn't been built, I still have an idea of where this project is proposed based off of tax parcel information. And then again, we trace about the fence line around the solar panels to do further analysis. So most recent data analysis figures coming out of it. So each of the counties is the amount of acres of built utility scale solar. So most of it, Somerset County has the most right now built utility scale solar, and then Dorchester County. There's lots of counties that still don't have built utility scale solar, even if it's proposed or it has been approved in the CPCN process. And then all these little dots are actually community solar. So MEA started releasing, Maryland Energy Administration started releasing their community solar projects, and so I started tracking those more recently. So you can almost see there's an inverse relationship where there's less utility scale solar built, there's a lot more community solar, Baltimore County, Montgomery, Howard, et cetera. What kind of land is going under utility scale solar? So I haven't done this for community yet, this is just utility. Again, as of May 2024, another project could have been built since then. So just under 2,000 acres have been built into utility scale solar. That's again tracing the fence line. Then I can use NASS, National Ag Statistics Service, part of USDA's cropscape layer, to estimate the kind of land or the land use before the solar panels were developed. And so from that, we saw that just under 90% was on cultivated commercial ag land. The other land that we saw was specialty ag production, forested land, and developed spaces. A developed one is a park in Prince George's County. It's one project. And a nice thing that I always like to tout about Maryland is that because we have a lot of protections for the Chesapeake Bay and things like that, we aren't seeing a lot of deforestation for renewable energy development. That's another thing other states are struggling with or having to balance is actually clearing forested lands to build solar. So that's something that we're not really seeing as much in Maryland. So that's something that you guys can be happy and excited about. So again, just actually confirming what land is being covered with solar by ground truthing through satellite imagery and then overlaying that with data from USDA. And that's coming from satellite imagery. So common land characteristics for large-scale solar. This is all about making it the most economically feasible project for both the developer and also making sure or getting the landowner the best deal, most amount of money for rent or leasing their land. And so flat land, not a lot of slope. You don't want too many like mountains or things that provide shade like big trees or buildings. Anything on the land that needs to be cleared is just going to be additional cost. Something that doesn't flood easily. Apparently electricity and water don't mix super well. And then also the biggest thing that would make one property more attractive than another is the proximity to the power line or substation. And so now that we know that most of the land in Maryland is that's going into utility scale solar is commodity commercial production, corn and soybean rotation primarily. And we also know that the agricultural community or there's concerns about replacing farmland with solar. Then why are farmers choosing to, why are they choosing to develop their land into solar? It comes down to some economic reasoning. So we took the rental rates that we were hearing. We've also got some redacted contracts that have come across our desk that we could use to update some of these estimates. And then we used University of Maryland Extension's crop budgets that are updated every year. to estimate how much a farm per acre usually gets versus how much they might get from a solar lease. And so I know it's a lot of numbers and nothing too scary, but just across the top you can see the utility scale solar rent. These are estimates going from like the low end of $500 per acre per year to $5,000 per acre per year. And then again, for the farm profit estimates, that's between corn and soybean, what we would see in like a less than ideal year of around $500 per acre per year, up to $1,125 per acre per year. Again, this varies, these are just estimates. And then comparing. So you can see in most cases that utility scale solar is going to provide more money per acre per year to the farmer than what they might get as a commodity corn soybean rotation producer. And so a lot of you, this seems intuitive, it makes sense, but I was getting questions of, okay, so if the ag community is not in favor of developing farmland into solar, then why are they doing it? And it really just comes down to their own business decisions and what makes most sense for them. So that is that. And then what we're trying to get and what we've been continuing to do and giving these types of presentations is have informed conversations. We want people to make the best decisions for their own land, whether that has to do with renewable energy contracts or not. And just making sure that we're being sustainable and mindful of where we're putting renewable energy. And so we have developed some resources and then we're starting to put them out. We have this solar leasing website with a few videos, and we'll continue to add stuff to this website for, you can see Paul there in the screenshot giving some tidbits on solar leasing. And then I am continuing to work on that data that made those maps and gave you those results, actually making it so you guys can look at them yourself on a web page. I love data and I love doing modeling and analysis, but I'm not a web developer, so bear with me as I learn how to make this more user-friendly. I know that it's in its like very infancy stages, but the data is good. It's just not the funnest to use right now. But hopefully I'll have some time here soon to get back to that. So with that, that's my presentation, and now we have Drew.
Keep me on track.
Well, we gave you extra time.
Oh, extra time. I'll probably lose my voice before that. So good afternoon. My name again is Drew Schiavone. I am an energy specialist with the University of Maryland Extension, and I have the privilege of sharing some of our initiatives in the solar energy arena. So I'll talk about some of the core educational outreach and engagement projects that we're involved in, as well as some of the Elizabeth alluded to it a little earlier about our agrivoltaic projects that we're launching. So I'll talk about some of that, but I'll give you a little context of the Extension service. I imagine most of you are familiar with the role of Extension, but in a lot of ways we're the front door to the university, connecting our research and education out of the College Park campus to the public. And so we offer various programs and like this and like workshop seminars, technical assistance and training. And my niche is in energy conservation and technology, and so obviously solar falls within that. Bob mentioned some of the pressures, the state's very ambitious renewable energy goals, solar being one of those, the carve out for that. Where those projects are sited, those are a lot of the challenges that we have to address as researchers and educators and informing the public on that. So that's some of the things I'll mention today is how we help to navigate some of that. I think, Bob, you mentioned 20,000 acres of agricultural land to support our renewable goals in the state, and there's other environmental goals like greenhouse gas emissions reduction and those kind of things. And our role is not to advocate for any technology or development, but it's really to provide the context for a sustainable decision to be made. So, again, Elizabeth's talking about we're not necessarily facing forestry issues, but the agricultural land's a big thing. So if we're, losing agricultural industry to that's kind of a trade-off that needs to be accounted for. So those are the pieces that we're looking at. Let me see if I can navigate here. Yeah, so I'll just quickly point to some of the resources. I won't go into too much detail on this, but there's a number of resources that we provide on solar energy. So if you are wanting to get your feet wet in this and just to get more familiar with it, maybe you're a little bit more adept with solar energy, maybe you have solar at your home already, but we have a host of resources on our extension webpage. That's extension.umd.edu. And so off to the right-hand side, you'll see a list of kind of ideas of curriculum that you can review. Those are free and open to the public to review those resources, everything from a review of the solar marketplace, and Bob did a great job of kind of crash course in that a moment ago, but everything from that to, further down in that curriculum, there's some financial resources if you're looking for incentives or financial payback models and things for supporting solar. Those are some of the resources that are available. So you're welcome to peruse that website or reach out to me directly as well. I'll quickly just point out a couple of the impacts that this type of programming has before I get into some of the agrivoltaic stuff that I'll touch on. But we've seen tremendous impacts from a lot of these different programs. So again, it's a host of different workshops, seminars, and presentations, tutorials and training, both with end users of landowners, residential installers, as well as on the industry side of the solar industry and other services that we provide to train the public. But we've, in the last, I think, about 5 years, we've seen 700 people come through our programs. And again, going back to what Elizabeth said, the University of Maryland, we are stakeholder-driven, providing that stakeholder-driven information. It's unbiased information, and it's not for, our goal is not to see solar installed everywhere. That's not that's not our role. So I'll give you an example. A lot of times I get consultations, phone calls come in, and people wanting to install solar, and you have to back up and say, have you done A, B, and C, energy conservation up front, or have you looked at the impacts to the land? And there's so many different factors to weigh in. Solar may not be in their best interest economically or environmentally, whatever their goal may be. And so that, with that said, again, I'm not selling anyone solar. That's not our role with the university, but we have seen over 30 megawatts of solar installed through our programs. We monitor the greenhouse gas emission reductions as part of that, kind of documentation for state goals and how we're advancing those state level criteria. Economic savings is a part of that, but that all goes to kind of what I shared, some of those resources and trainings that we offer throughout the year. You can get more information again on our website related to those core educational program areas on energy. But I'll kind of segue into, with the remaining time, is talk about some of the innovative agrivoltaic projects that we're working on now. So we're looking at agrivoltaics, and when I say agrivoltaics, everyone probably has a different idea of what that is. You might refer to it as agri-solar or dual-use farming, but I'll just keep it a very general definition for my discussion today. What I mean by agrivoltaics is the simultaneous use of land for agricultural production and solar production. So having solar panels on a functional operational farm on that same area of land, not just on a side piece of marginal land, but actually having those two systems interplay. So that could be livestock, it could be, you could have sheep grazing beneath the panels. Our focus with our projects, and I'll get into that here in a moment, but our focus is on vegetable production, maybe some cash crops, and smaller, as part of our pilot program that we're launching. We're looking at some smaller projects, but that's what I mean by agrivoltaics. We've done some survey work up front, and what we're seeing by and large is there's a growing interest in agrivoltaics from landowners, from producers, and others as well, from solar industries wanting to get involved. They see the importance of it, and how we navigate that going forward is looking at the challenges that they're facing, because a lot of these folks, they want to see how to do it, and then they just don't have the answers, and they're not going to invest in something if they don't have the answers, and that's where we come in as researchers and educators to provide that information. So they want to see these projects, and that's where the direction we're moving. I won't go through all this data, but I want to show how multifaceted this is. It seems simple enough to to put solar panels on a farm and farm around them, but there's so many different pieces to fit together on this. It's everything from, water and soil quality and what kind of impacts are you going to have, but below the panels, are you going to have erosion? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. So those are things that we need to answer for our stakeholders to be able to see if this is a viable option for them moving forward. As well as, the operational side as well. Combines or tractors and operating that equipment in and around the solar panels, that's a challenge, and we have to address some of those things. So this is kind of where we're at now, is continuing to conduct these types of survey assessments, and that's really how we serve the public and serve the needs of the community, and then identify how we can address some of those issues. Okay, so we do have connections with other stakeholders in other states, Penn State and Rutgers, and as we continue to, I'll touch on what our projects involve, but there are other stakeholders outside the region, and what we see is taking what we see as priorities in Maryland in terms of the research objectives, as well as leveraging our other stakeholders in other states and institutions and groups here in the state, trying to bring all that together, and we want to develop research and education hubs here in the state, and I'll get to that, but we want to be able to answer those questions for the Mid-Atlantic region, because if we look at projects that are done out in Arizona or Colorado or somewhere, it's not really going to address the circumstances that we have here in the Mid-Atlantic, and so that's where we're moving with this. We're taking all that data, that's all kind of on the back end, and you don't need to get bogged down with that type of data, but we're realigning these research objectives with what the National Renewable Energy Lab has identified as research priorities. So these kind of broad categories, I'll just look at the top one there is climate, soil, and environment. So there's a lot of research that we have to do within that one category, and leveraging our research expertise and experience in those areas will help us to address things within that climate. Would involve the microclimate studies below the panels, because there's some cooling and heating. There's benefits to the solar panels because they are cooled off. There's benefits to the plants because some of that heat's absorbed, and it's kind of there's a whole ecosystem for us to look at. There's wildlife biodiversity and other stuff. So we're bringing in a lot of different groups, both within the university as well as external stakeholders, to address these questions. But that's kind of in a nutshell on the design phase, and so we're incorporating all this into the design phase. So what we're looking to do here in the near future is we have funding to develop 2 pilot projects at our research and education centers. One is out in western Maryland in Washington County. We have a 500-acre farm out there, and then we have another, the Y Research and Education on the Eastern Shore. So we'll do 2 projects there. They'll each be in the ballpark of about 100 kW, smaller plots of land. That's the funding that we have available. Our focus is going to be on maybe some cash crops, maybe some primarily vegetable crops to grow under those. The 2 locations gives us some research capability to look at different environments, markets, as well as even down to the soil type is going to be different. You're going to have sandy soils versus clay soils in western Maryland. So there'll be a little bit difference there, and we'll be able to address the diversity of the state that we're dealing with. With that comes, the whole energy side and the configurations of the systems. It's not going to be your typical solar installation. It requires strategic placement and technology. So we're looking at how we configure that in the field. Again, to everything down to operating field equipment around. If you can't get a tractor down the road, then it's not going to be very manageable. So we're looking at those kind of features. We're looking at what types of solar panels, bifacial solar panels probably. But we've got to work out the spacing and the height based on our identification of priority crops. So it is kind of give and take with, it is kind of give and take with what crops are identified as high value commodities and suitable for this. But we're looking at different crops and cultivars, and as well as how we design and lay those projects out in the field. And so that's an active area that we're going to be getting into in the near future, is looking at those 2 sites and how we can configure those plots to best accommodate that research that we're looking to do. And I think this is the last point, is that in addition to that research that we're addressing, I shared all the multifaceted approaches of research we're looking at. But we see this as again, a regional demonstration hub, not only serving research, but also facilitating educational outreach with the public. So these projects are intended to serve as educational resources for our students through College Park and other institutions, but as well as bringing in other groups, industry folks as well, whether it be from the solar industry needs to engage in this area, and they are interested in that, as well as farmer and landowner education. And so that's what we do in Extension really well, is connecting making this data available and useful to the public, so they can hopefully identify those areas and see progress in this state here in the near future if we're going to address those land use. This is one solution, of course. There's all types of things we can talk about, siting and location and everything, but the agrivoltaics things that we're doing it's one possible solution to dealing with some of these land use issues we're seeing between solar and farming. Okay, so my contact information is there, but I'll wrap up, and I don't know.
You have 15 minutes for questions.
Question to you.
Yeah, Kristen's.
Is there any issue with contamination from the panels onto the ground that ultimately would make the soil toxic? Any issues you've seen there, any issues you're going to be looking at, or is that even realistic?
So the question's about contamination from the panels themselves. Did you hear me? Yeah, oh, that's better. So the question is from the panels themselves. By and large, most of the solar panels are there are a few panels, like thin film panels. It's a different technology. It's not as widely deployed. Thin film is this very small market share. Most of the panels, the monocrystalline panels used today do not have much, if any, contaminants in them. You're talking about cadmium telluride and other things in these thin film modules. But for the most part, there's not really a contaminant issue. It's mostly glass, aluminum frame, and the recycling industry is growing significantly as well. So that glass and aluminum and the small metals that are in there, that's becoming more and more viable to recycle those products as well. The other thing I'll say is that if there is a product like a thin film panel that has a small contaminant in it, it's a very small amount, but you still have, and I'll get acronyms wrong, you like acronyms, but I'm not very good at them. It's the EPA's Resource Recovery Act, and at a local level you'll have to address that if it's going to a landfill or something. In those particular panels, you want to make sure that contaminant's not entering the landfill or something like that. They'll need to know that.
A question over here.
I want to thank you for coming out and giving this presentation, and I'm actually just taking this opportunity to make a comment with respect to solar, and that is that I am on record in my community and as often as I can say, that I am of the opinion that to take perfectly good and valuable, productive agricultural land and cover it with solar panels is a lie when it is presented as a viable and a reasonable approach to our energy needs. Also, I became involved in energy transmission in Maryland when I became involved with an opposition to a high voltage power line coming through Hartford County, and I visited many meetings at PJM. I actually worked with PPRP to object to a line that was coming through Hartford County. And in that, I learned a good bit about our our energy policies in the state of Maryland, and that this march toward non-renewable energy production for Maryland is a disastrous decision on the part of our lawmakers, because we cannot sustain our energy needs with the current technology of renewable solar and wind. I'm not going to get into an argument about that or even a discussion. It's just that I have read a good bit of information that would support that statement. And actually, at the most recent meeting in which I attended with PJM regarding the project that's going through Baltimore County, a statement was made that closer to 80% of the energy from Maryland is being imported, that the renewable resources will not support our energy needs, especially with the data centers that are coming in. So thank you for your time, but in a group of farmers and agricultural producers, I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
I have another question. The New York Times did a story, weeks ago, about all the PFAS contamination that they're now starting to test for on agricultural land due to putting on some form of human sludge on the soil for nutrients. And going heavy metals are accommodated in the sewage treatment process, but the PFASs are not. It's getting on the soil, and according to this article in the New York Times, 24 million acres of farmland in the United States has been contaminated, and there's zero coming on a PFAS that's safe. Why wouldn't we, if in fact there's some big drive to put solar on agricultural land, kind of what this land is saying, that land is no good for anything anymore, not a chicken, not a hog, not a piece of grain, nothing. So it's going to be completely useless land. That's a good place to put solar for agriculture. Is anybody in your field, any of you university people thinking about that, talking about discussing it?
Well, I can make a comment, and I don't know if Elizabeth, you wanted to add anything. You know, I don't cite the project, so I don't dictate where they go. I just tell folks if it makes any sense to meet those goals. I'm responding to state policy that's already in place and the market incentives for a installer to go to. I mean, Elizabeth mentioned some of the, rates for land and things like that. That's kind of out of my hands. From a personal standpoint, it makes very much sense to me to cite in those projects, and I think that the agricultural bit is a very small bit of what Bob was talking about. I think it's those projects are going rooftop and other places as well, but it does make absolutely sense to me to cite it on marginal land, brownfields, even commercial, paved areas and things like that. So, from an environmental standpoint, that I think adds tremendous benefit. Again, it's not my role as a representative of the University of Maryland. It doesn't make sense to me scientifically to install it on every piece of agricultural land. It's not what I'm advocating for. I don't know if there's any particular research that you wanted to add.
Yeah, I'll just say that as we're tracking where solar's going, there is more, like Bob was saying, smaller projects. Also, some of these community solar projects can go on the rooftop of commercial industrial buildings. So we started tracing and keeping track of the community solar projects. And so these smaller projects are going on developed land or not necessarily farmland. So we are starting to see that trend because it is harder to get these larger prime farmlands turned into utility scale solar, and that could also be in response from county zoning and public comment, and those are things that I hope to model and analyze at some point. So that's the other thing I had to add. There's a question back there.
We have one right now.
Oh, okay.
Are you seeing anything on lightning strikes?
No. No. Even wind shear on panels just doesn't seem to happen. I mean, unless the wind exceeds 140 miles per hour.
I'm talking more about solar.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Tornadoes.
Yeah.
It's out west. I mean, I saw a project in Nebraska from tornado damage, and that's always a potential, but that'll take out anything.
Yeah, hi, thank you for speaking about this. I had heard that there's a piece of legislation, and I don't have the bill number, coming into the Maryland legislature for this coming year that would allow ag preservation lands to be, to have solar installations put on them. And unfortunately, our ag preservation lands, a lot of counties target their prime farmland for those ag preservation lands. So if that happens, the farmer would be able to put the solar on there, and my understanding is that the counties would not receive any compensation for the money that they have invested in that farmland to keep it in preservation. So I was wondering if you could speak to that, Bill, at all, and then I'll just back it up with a second comment about the rentals for being $5,000 an acre and being above the cost of profit for any other farmland. I mean, most states in the United States rent from 30 to 40% of their farmland. So there's the added issue of causing additional hardship for those farmers who are renting a large portion of their land, and they can no longer compete with what the solar companies are offering. So I just wanted to bring that one to light and then go back to my first one about the legislation. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as legislation, I mean, there's several bills that are being proposed, but they're proposed. So I know I have participated and commented on several of those. I don't know the status, if they're going to move forward or not. So, but they're pretty well diametrically opposed to each other when it comes to solar. So they both have components in them concerning land preservation, et cetera, but who knows what, I've heard many bills are coming this year concerning solar, so.
What do you think about an alternative approach in actually giving the counties a mandate that they need to get so much of a percentage of their power from solar, and then letting them decide the best way to implement that instead of mandating, that they use their ag preservation land?
Well, actually, one of the bills proposed, if it's going to impact preservation lands, even MHT properties and several other easements, then the developer had to make a payment to the county. And then the county was specifically supposed to spend that money in X, Y, and Z. So it spelled that out very clearly. So that is being thought of, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So the price of farmland, we've heard everything from $1,200 to $2,500 per acre in Maryland. But the problem is when we see those, PPRP see those, they're redacted. So it looks like one big black piece of paper. But that's just kind of hearsay. I don't know if you have any data.
Yeah, is this working? Okay. In response to that, I take a similar, what Drew was saying, that these are the market conditions, these are the enacted policies. And so what we're looking at is just analyzing what's out there and trying to give, if I'm talking about this to someone in Canada, explaining why we can have the farming community against development of farmland into solar, but we still see individual farmers developing their farmland into solar. And so it's really just to give that snapshot of what individuals are making as decisions. Again, not necessarily for or against the development of solar in different places, but that's just how it's happening, and to understand why and where and all that is an interesting research question that I hope to continue to dig into. And the other legislation to be aware of is this idea of corridors for where the siting of renewable energy could be more preferred. So that's another legislation to keep an eye on that could work. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'd have to read more into it and see what the responses are. So I think
We have one last question.
one more question. And then
Over here. And my question actually dovetails with what you were talking about a moment before. Are you only able to get the rental rates directly from farmers, or is there another source of information that you're using to get those values? And are you finding that the non-disclosure agreements are posing a problem blocking people from getting information from one another?
Yeah, definitely the NDAs can be an issue with any of this research, and the lawyers in the room can correct me because I'm not a lawyer, but until it's actually signed, the NDA isn't. So if someone's presented a contract and they don't actually sign it, then they can share it, right? They're not against anything. So we've seen contracts that have been redacted and shared with us that we just have like a list of the rental rates we've heard, and then from the focus group interviews, and then with attorneys and others, we just say, does that range sound fair? So again, that's about as good as we can get of quality research. We don't have really a better source except when someone says that's outrageous or that's completely wrong, who's actually seen some of these offers. So that's the best. We can talk more about it after as well. We'll be around. Great. Thank you, guys.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Leonard. I'm the chair of the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics at the University of Maryland, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jennifer King Rice, the Provost and Senior Vice President at the University of Maryland. Provost Rice has served on the faculty and in college leadership roles at the university for more than 25 years, and she's been recognized as a University of Maryland Distinguished Scholar Teacher. In her role as the leader of the academic side of the university, Dr. Rice and I have crossed paths many times while she met with emerging and current leaders on campus. Of course, much of that was online, and I was just a tiny little box on her screen. But she was the big box on my screen. And I agreed to take on the role of leadership and in the department, in part, and my first love is research, not administration. I agreed to take on this role in large part because I knew we were in the hands of a capable leader. I listened as she articulated her vision for the ascending university, and I heard her talk about how she balanced her family and work when she started her journey of leadership. I heard her talk about how important it was for the university to serve the community, and of course the great state of Maryland. And at the same time, I heard her talk about how important it was to treat our workforce properly. And one of the most important roles that she served was as a leader during the height of the pandemic. And we all went online, and we did not know how to do it. We'll find out eventually how we did when those kids are leaders on their own, but we had no choice. And Dr. Rice led us in that terrifying adventure that we had not chosen. Today, our conversations have focused on agriculture, the environment, and particularly the role of law in agriculture. My involvement stems from the fact that my department's affiliation with the Ag Law Initiative, ALEI, and I take immense pride in the work of my colleagues. I'm learning to describe the ALEI as a way of understanding and, when possible, reducing friction. So you can't launch a rocket into space with 12th grade physics. You have to understand how friction actually works. So the Ag Law Initiative helps us communicate to policymakers that farmers have lives, families, aspirations, hopes, and dreams. They don't wake up in the morning asking what laws they can comply with before breakfast. Good laws need to recognize this fact. But friction can be reduced, too. We can help farmers to understand the legislation that's in front of them, and we can also help legislators to design better legislation. In the College of Agriculture, we cherish our dialogues with farmers, as today, and the pinnacle of our career would be seeing a farmer's wisdom encapsulated in legislation. And lastly, we all know about the friction in our society. We have many different types of people here in the state of Maryland, and we don't always agree. But ALEI helps reduce these frictions by assuring farmers that they've been listened to and that they matter, even in College Park. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Provost Jennifer King Rice with the statement, here's a woman who knows what it means to bridge practice and policy. She's an advocate for change in education, and because she spent time in the classroom and she listened to teachers. She truly understands the fundamental purpose of a university as great as the University of Maryland. Jennifer King Rice.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I come from education, so we wait for the responses. It is great to see you all. Thank you so much for having me. And Ken, I just want to thank you for that incredibly generous and gracious introduction. Thank you. I do come from the field of education. Prior to stepping into the provost role at the University of Maryland, I was the Dean of the College of Education, and I am truly, deeply committed to being a university for the public good, that our work should really matter. We should be doing things that really matter. Our scholarship should matter, our teaching should matter, our service work. So, you know, trying to lead the university in that direction, and it's not been hard with leaders like Ken and so many of the university faculty and leaders in this room. We need to partner, and we need to make change. And so I'm really grateful to be here with you all today. So many key university employees, faculty, leadership, our partners in government and industry, thank you for coming together, for taking the time, for teaching and learning one another. I very strongly believe that research should inform practice, but practice should also inform research. And so that cyclical pattern is really important, and so we all learn from each other through these kinds of opportunities. So thank you for that. I would also really like to explicitly shout out a big thanks to the Agriculture Law Education Initiative team. The leadership, the faculty, putting this wonderful conference together is a heavy lift. These things don't happen on their own. I know that very well, and so I do want to thank you all, and in particular, Kristen Redding. Is Kristen in the room? Kristen back here. The team's coordinator, who I understand was absolutely essential in pulling this conference together. So, Kristen, thank you. I also want to acknowledge and thank all of the speakers and the panelists. As I said, these things matter because of the exchange, because of the meaningful sharing of ideas and experiences, of evidence, of concerns, of fears. Speakers and panelists, thank you for being part of that, for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with the group today. And maybe most importantly, to all of you for being in this room, for your shared commitment to the future of our state and our world. These are important issues. I spent a lot of time looking at the agenda for today, and were a lot of really critical issues that need to be sorted out. I heard the tail end of the last session, and you know, that kind of exchange is absolutely critical to finding paths forward through what I consider to be contested terrain. So let me just say, I am so proud to be a leader of an institution that is so deeply committed in everything that we do to serving our state, through our education, through our research, through our service work and our partnerships. While much of our work has really widespread applications around the world, the work that we do right here at home, right here in Maryland, is absolutely essential to our community and to our state's success, and in turn, to our university's success. You know, we have a line in our strategic plan that I think is my very favorite line. I quote it a lot. And it says something like, at the University of Maryland, we believe that our individual well-being is enduringly bound to our collective well-being. And I really believe that. We're not doing our work alone. We're doing our work with others and for others. And I think it's absolutely essential to remember that all the time. And to add to that, the opportunity to partner with our fellow state institutions, the University of Maryland in Baltimore and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, only serves to amplify that commitment of shared responsibility and shared impact. The Agriculture Law Education Initiative is also a testament to the success of our Empowering the State partnership with the University of Maryland, Baltimore. This partnership aims to strengthen and serve the state of Maryland and its citizens. Since its creation in 2012, Empower has fostered hundreds of collaborations that wouldn't have happened without this important legislation. From across both institutions that are growing Maryland's innovative economy, advancing interdisciplinary research, increasing educational benefits and workforce development, and addressing so many of our state's most pressing and critical challenges. The partnership is really, truly delivering on a vision of collaboration and innovation and transformative impact across our state in so many ways. And I want to call out Adrienne Arthur here, our fearless leader of the Empowering the State partnership, for her ongoing stewarding of this really important vision. At the University of Maryland College Park, everything that we do is rooted in our pursuit of excellence and impact for the public good. In fact, those words are the title of our strategic plan, which I always carry a copy of in my folder, and so anyone can have this at the end. But I like to wave around this strategic plan because it really does articulate what we're about at the University of Maryland. It's called Fearlessly Forward in Pursuit of Excellence and Impact for the Public Good. It is focused squarely on being a university, a flagship public research-intensive university for the public good in all that we do. This is really important to us. One of the most important ways that we can achieve the ambitious goals that we've laid out in this strategic plan is from the work that we reference as our critical enablers, the things that need to be in place to reflect our values and to achieve our goals. These are really the keys to the plan's success. And I want to highlight just two of those. There's 6 of them articulated in the plan, but I want to talk about 2 of them that I think are clearly demonstrated here today. You are enabling us to realize our vision. One has to do with external engagement, sparking dialogue and collaboration with partners to accelerate and amplify and expand the impact that we're able to have. And so I thank all of our partners in the room for collaborating with us to that end. And the second is really our strategic location, right here in the state of Maryland, at the nexus of both our state and nation's capitals, in a state that has agriculture and has the Chesapeake Bay, has cities and rural areas, and we need to serve all of those spaces and serve them well. And without those 2 critical enablers, this work wouldn't have the kind of impact that it's having. Another part of our plan is our goals, which fall into 4 what we call strategic commitments. They're often recognized as pillars, but we think of them as strategic commitments because of the overlap and the synergy that they have. To reimagine learning, to be experiential, to be meaningful and transformative for our students, but to reimagine learning, to address humanity's grand challenges. And these are challenges that can't be addressed with one discipline or field or perspective alone. Again, why it's so important for everyone to be together in this room today, to take on the grand challenges that are facing agriculture here in our state and beyond. To invest in people and communities, and we're investing in our own people and communities, but also the people and communities in the state of Maryland, and to partner to advance the public good. I don't know about you all, but I really can't think of a better way to describe the work being done by the Agriculture Law Education Initiative than right here at this conference, reflecting those 4 pillars. It's really your collective expertise that will help us address some of the world's most pressing issues, some of our state's most pressing issues, such as climate change and food insecurity. It's your dialogue here today that will lead to greater impact on our communities, near and far. And again, it's your partnership that will allow us to advance the public good and impact the lives of people in Maryland, the lives of people across our country, and those around the globe as well. So I just want to conclude by thanking you once again for being here today, for being tremendous partners, and for being committed to making an impact in real and meaningful ways. So thank you all very much.